I will leave it at the altar, God.
Hello and welcome. We are here with our November 23rd episode of 25 Live at Home. We are so glad that you joined us. This week we are going to be talking about Jesus' crucifixion. For those of you who attended church today was Christ the King Sunday, so we're starting to look at that story as well. So let's open by hearing Luke 23:33-43. When they came to the place known as the Skull, they crucified Jesus there, in the company of criminals, one to the right of Jesus and the others to his left. Jesus says, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing." Meanwhile, they were drawing lots, or casting die, to see who would win Jesus' clothing. The crowd of people stood watching. The authorities, or the soldiers, mocking Jesus, said, "So he was supposed to rescue the others, was he? He was supposed to be God's anointed, the liberating king. Let's see him start by liberating himself." The soldiers joined in the mockery. First, they pretended to offer him a soothing drink, but it was sour wine. "Hey, if you're the king of the Jews, why don't you free yourself?" Even the inscription they placed over him was intended to mock him. "This is the king of the Jews." One of the criminals joined in the cruel talk. This was a cynical criminal. "You're supposed to be the anointed one, right? Well, do it. Rescue yourself and us." But the other criminal told him to be quiet. The believing criminal said, "Do you have any fear of God at all? You're getting the same death sentence he is. We're getting what we deserve since we've committed crimes, but this man hasn't done anything wrong. Jesus, when you come into your kingdom, please remember me." Jesus says, "I promise you that this very day you will be with me in paradise." So, today's story opens with Jesus on a hill. He's among the three crosses. This is one of our darkest days. It's Good Friday. And it's not good because it was a happy and joyful time. It's good because this is the end of Jesus, where he died on the cross for our sins before he would eventually, as we know, come back on Easter Sunday. But today we're talking about what's going on here at the crucifixion. So in this story, Jesus is showing courage, forgiveness, and he gives a promise. It's Jesus and these two criminals. Now, there are crowds watching him as well. This would have been a very sad time, and there would have been folks that were watching. And we actually know that some of his disciples were among the group. His mother Mary was within the group. And so, we're observing Jesus in his final moments. That gets us to our when. Jesus is in the final year of his life. These are his final moments. It's his last hour. Where is this happening? This is on a hill called the Skull. Not a very good name for a place that you would want to be, that's for sure. This would have been a very sad place, a very solemn place, and Jesus is experiencing his final part of his life here. So when we think about this story, Jesus has been nailed to the cross and he's being ridiculed and mocked. He's been named the King of the Jews, which was a slight not only at Jesus but also at the religious leaders who tried to who got Jesus crucified. Pontius Pilate was someone who was the Roman in charge, and he didn't really think that Jesus needed to die at all. But to mock those religious leaders and explain to them how unhappy he was, he made Jesus the King of the Jews, which in turn made the religious leaders of the day very unhappy. There are soldiers that are casting lots or playing games and gambling to see who gets to win Jesus' clothing. They give Jesus this sour wine and just generally are trying to make Jesus' final moments so very unpleasant. And then we come to these two criminals. And this is a very interesting part of our story. One criminal is actually joining in on the teasing. He's hanging on the cross there, dying in the same way that Jesus is, but he takes this moment to tease Jesus and say, if you're the King of the Jews, just save yourself. And we know that Jesus knows that he has to do this so that we might be forgiven of our sins, so that we don't have to make continual sacrifices, right? We don't have to travel to a temple and sacrifice an animal each week or each month or each year. We are given that forgiveness freely from God because his son gave the ultimate sacrifice. And as we think about this, then there's this other criminal who I'm sure is feeling this sense of remorse, feeling a sense of sadness that I've made these poor decisions in my life, and because of this, now I'm dying. And he recognizes that Jesus is completely innocent. Jesus has done nothing wrong. And he believes in what Jesus has been saying. He's heard the stories, and he knows that Jesus is God's only son. And he says, we deserve this punishment, but Jesus does not. Jesus, when you come into your kingdom, when you become Christ the King, will you save me a place? And Jesus promises, even in these darkest moments, even in these times where you can feel around, whether it's Jesus or whether it's the people around, there's a lot of sadness and grief. And Jesus takes this moment and he's in pain, he's suffering, and he says to this criminal, he says, truly, I tell you, at the end of all of this, you will be with me in paradise. And I think that's the hope, right, that comes from this really scary story. We've been talking a lot about fear here in the month of November. And I think that's the hope, right, that despite all of these wrongdoings and these sins, Jesus lets this criminal know that because you asked for the forgiveness and because you asked to be in relationship with me, that I will give you the forgiveness that you seek and you will be with me in paradise. Forgiveness matters, right? Jesus gave forgiveness to someone even while he was hurting and even while he was in great pain, and even though this person had done something so very wrong, right? I think that's the hard part for some of us here, is it's hard to give that forgiveness. It's hard to reconcile our own pain and hurt when someone does something wrong to us. It's hard for us to forgive because we're feeling that hurt and that pain. And Jesus shows us that even when we're hurt, we can give forgiveness. It also teaches us to ask for help. God wants to help, right? God has this relationship with us. And even in these final moments for this criminal, God and Jesus are there to help. He asked for help and help was given, right? And I think that's another important part too, is we don't have to sit in our grief and our fear. We can ask for help, whether that be from God and Jesus or from the people around us, right? Using our resources and using our families, using, those who are counselors, using those who are therapists, using community resources. All of those are ways and places we can ask for help. This story gives us hope and promises. Jesus promises paradise even to what many would have considered the worst of the worst from the day then. Jesus gives a promise that we can trust in God's love even when things are hard. It shows us that we can be kind even when things are hard, right? Jesus is feeling this pain and suffering, and he takes a moment to be kind, even though so many around him are not returning that or giving him that kindness. And I think that's a lesson we can take into our lives, is that even when others around us aren't giving that kindness, we can still show that kindness. And I think the last and most exciting thing is that everyone can change, right? The criminal who showed he was sorry shows that people can choose to do the right thing. And it might take until the very end, but everyone does have an opportunity to change. We can be thankful for that. I have a challenge for you this week. Could you have each family member make a forgiveness card? I want you to draw or write one thing that you would want to say sorry for, or one person that you would want to forgive. So it might be that you're the person that is the criminal and you are asking for the forgiveness and you want to say sorry. Or it could be that you're the person that finds themselves in Jesus' shoes and you are someone who, even though things are hard and it's really hard to forgive, you want to practice that forgiveness. So that would be my challenge for you this week. How could you and your family make your own forgiveness card? Thanks so much.
Hi, today we have Shannon Hammond Minor here with us from the school district, and we have some fun questions, and we hope that she'll help us to better understand what all kind of supports there are for us and our students. Can you tell us a little about yourself and what you do and how you support families of students in our district and students in our district?
Got it. Absolutely. So thank you for having me. I love to talk about school and I love to talk about caregivers in community together. So this is an awesome opportunity. So my role is that I support the Student and Family Advocate Program throughout the entire district. And I serve as both the district's homeless liaison and foster care point of contact, which are integrated roles that specifically relate to the educational stability of students who might be experiencing different transitions, whether it's housing instability or active involvement with the child welfare system. There's just some real specific rights and responsibilities they have, and we always want all children, no matter who they are, to have access to school and school supports. So our work supports and specifically connects students and the adults in their lives to school and with school. So on a daily basis for me, what that means is that you may see me out coaching our student and family advocates in the building. We have one in every building, collaborating with both building and district administrators and other support staff, attending meetings to kind of support some of our programmatic goals, but also to integrate the work that we're doing into all functions of school. And I think that ultimately, and I get to kind of coordinate some school district community relationships, which is really fun. Mostly I just get to talk to people every day and always hope that I get to leave them with a sense of connection and kind of this idea that we have a shared goal in our children and that we're all in it together. Yeah.
Our next question is, what are some red flags that a parent might look for if they feel their child is struggling in school, or maybe even if your child sees another child who appears to be struggling? What are some things we can teach them to look for?
Oh, I love this. I like that you added that part about teaching them. Well, all children, really all humans, experience ups and downs, right? So that's a normal part of growing. It's a normal part of developing. And it doesn't always mean anything is wrong. It might just mean we're going through something right now. But what is really most important, and I'm a parent, I know you guys have talked about having children, that you know your kids, and you just need to pay attention to noting if something is significant or if there's a lasting shift or change in kind of their mood, behavior, routines, and as it relates to school, especially around their relationship with school or things that are frequently happening at school. I always think about increased frustration with certain subjects, right? More missed assignments, and that's not their gig. They get their work done, right? Yeah. If they're just more irritable or suddenly wanting to avoid school, can all show signs that they're struggling. I think, too, you always want to think about your children's kind of overall mental wellness. And obviously, we're whole people. So school impacts that. We impact that. So you might also notice like shifts in sleep or appetite or any new physical complaints. I always think socially you want to listen for what they share about their friends, their classmates, their experiences. Are they feeling left out? Are they worried? Or are they starting to use negative self-talk? These can all offer us helpful clues. And I really encourage parents and just the adults in the lives of children to remain really, really curious. So most of the time, these moments are going to just be a part of the natural bumps, but it also gives you an opportunity as the parent to stay in relationship with them, to kind of guide them through that stress and change, even sort of normalize it, right? Like, this is hard and hard's okay. And then if it's really seems to be out of character or it kind of sticks around, it's pervasive, that's a really good time to check in, obviously with your kiddo, but also their teacher or another school support staff member. Yeah.
What steps should parents take if they are concerned and would like to have their child tested for possible support services?
Absolutely. Well, student and family advocates are awesome navigators, so I can definitely speak to this. And I was one for 17 years before I started supporting them district-wide. So I like this question a lot. So I think it's important to clarify that schools don't necessarily test for supportive services directly. What they have is a structured process to determine kind of what kinds of interventions, or I'm just double checking that I'm saying this right, or evaluations might be appropriate. And they're going to partner with you along the way to ensure that children are getting what they need. And that's kind of a continuous progress monitoring is what we call it. But if you are concerned about your students' learning and think they may need some type of additional support, the best place to start is always with their teacher. Teachers observe your child's progress every day, and they can share valuable insight about what's going well and what they might see as challenges, especially because they know the curriculum and they know how kind of the class is operating. So they have some good kind of comparative information to share with you. And then I also think if you have an older student, I would encourage that you support them. Now, of course, you need to think about the development, what's developmentally appropriate for your child. But helping them to seek support too. Like, for example, my son recently told me that his math feels particularly difficult and that it's actually keeping him up at night worrying, which he's a sensitive kiddo. Staying up worrying is not so shocking. But I was like, wait, about math? That's where you've always just felt so good. And so I said, well, you're in middle school now. Like, let's have a conversation with your teacher. And he wasn't quite sure how to bridge that. So we went to the 5-minute check-in at conference and we practiced what he was going to ask. And then together we talked to the teacher and he came up with a plan, right? And that's also advocating for my child. That's teaching my child how to speak up for themselves. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So what other services do student family advocates provide to families who may be struggling? Like, we're thinking financial or food, clothing, counseling. You mentioned homelessness being one of those. What are some services that you provide?
Yeah, well, kind of playing off what we just last spoke about, if you're worried about navigating things regarding your school, you have support, and the student and family advocates are great navigators. I always think of them first and foremost as connectors. So they link students, families, school staff, and community resources to support student success. This includes the navigating school that we talked about, accessing basic needs and mental health support and resource navigation. And then that keeping students who are experiencing housing instability or with foster placement, any sort of removal shifts, kind of keeping them engaged in learning during transitional periods. There are very specific rights that students in those circumstances have to try to stabilize education during times of kind of stress, and SFAs are responsible for keeping their finger on that at the building level. They're navigators, resource hubs, and thought partners. We always think that we're working alongside all the adults in the lives of our students to brainstorm solutions, support social emotional growth, foster self-determination, and also do some crisis de-escalation. But their ultimate goal is just to keep everybody connected. And they are so trained at holding space for complex emotions, challenging relationships, difficult experiences. I think every single one of them knows in their heart that people show up every day and love their children. They send the best of themselves and of our community to us every day. And they're like cognitively, oh, I can't say the word. They're always aware of that. They're always cognizant. Thank you. They're always centering that. But I think it's really important to note too, when I have a platform to share, that what SFAs are not therapists, although several of our SFAs have that type of licensure and are certainly doing using counseling skills. That's good practice, but they're not therapists, and they don't always have direct access themselves to financial resources like internally. Instead, they act as bridges to community supports and really think about the strengths and the needs of families. So we're really good kind of conduits of what's happening in a given community. I'm just really incredibly proud of the work they do. And I think as a community, we should be proud of the investment we've put in them, because it isn't a program that is generalized across the state and not across the country.
Mm-hmm.
So our church has helped work with the SFA at Borlaug and at Weber with what was the backpack program. We would work with HACAP and then pack backpacks and take them on
Yep.
Fridays, and the
Yep.
SFAs would
District.
give them to students in a way that not everybody would know and
Yep.
identify those kids that were struggling. If a parent is only aware of the SFA,
Mhm.
that person would be able to maybe refer them to the school counselor if that was
Absolutely.
something they needed. Correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They could. Actually, kind of going back to if you're worried about your kiddos, I want to highlight too that I support the student and family advocates, but part of our role is integration and acting as a navigator. So, I'd always say start with the teacher if you're worried, but never forget that you have school counselors, and they're an excellent place to reach out to if you're worried about your kids' social emotional development, or even if you just have a good relationship with that person and you're trying to figure out some community resources, because we work in tandem so closely. Obviously, your admins can always, your principals can always sort of tag you into situations, depending on who you have a relationship with. And I also always think our school nurses, we forget our school nurses are really actually quite plugged in to social emotional needs, basic needs. In fact, I would say I was an elementary SFA for 17 years, and I would say that I worked in such close tandem with my school nurse all the time to think about how we can best support kids and families. Yeah.
Do you have any other information you feel our families should know that we haven't covered but could be helpful to them?
Yeah. I think that knowing that those folks are there, right? We talked about that because the building principal and the school counselor can really help you discuss if you are thinking your kid needs additional evaluative supports at school, whether that's for academics or behavior. They can discuss whether a formal review or evaluation might be helpful. And schools always use a team approach, so they'd be looking at combined classroom observations, progress data, and things like that, as well as input from families. But most importantly, I think I want people to know is that the number one thing that every parent and every adult in the lives of children can do is stay connected to the kid. Ask questions, remain curious, and really just listen to them. At the center of all child development, at the center of all human development, of course, is just a need for belonging and relationship. And I think even when that's hard, and especially when that's hard, so even if their needs are unique or differing, that's okay. You're the expert. You know your child. It's always okay to ask questions at school. I know that kind of everyone has a different cultural perspective on school and how it works in their lives, but ultimately our schools are a reflection of all of us working together, and we have a right as parents, we have a right as students to ask questions if we need support, seek clarity and understanding. And if you're helping a friend or a neighbor, or your student is like, hey, I'm really worried about my friend, right? In navigating school, anything you can do to guide them, to talk to teachers, the principal, or some adult they find safe within the building is really critical, because sometimes we'll get a phone call from a concerned community member who's like, my child's really worried about this kiddo, and that's great, we can check in, but ultimately parents and students get to determine what they need, right? And so the more that you can encourage them and walk alongside them to make that connection is more powerful. And the other great thing is that we have many avenues now of language access and communication tools that we've really never had before. And so it's okay if you're a parent that can't go to all the events, like it doesn't fit into your world, right? Like that's okay. You can always come to the school, call the school, stop by, and try to set up some time that works for you.
That's really important to know.
Yeah.
Sometimes you feel like there's only specified times, and maybe that's the only time you can have those conversations.
That's right. That is how the system has frequently looked. But I think it's just important to remember that you can reach out, and we'll tell you, like, hey, I won't be able to meet on Tuesday, but maybe I could talk to you on Wednesday. Does that work for you? When's your break? Let me call you during your break. There's a lot of flexibility, but you have to be able to say, hey, I want to talk about this. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming and joining us today. It's so
Absolutely.
important for us as a team. We want to know how we can best support our families and the mental health aspect as well as learning and development is key.
Yeah.
And it takes a village.
Mm-hmm.
Can't remember who said that, but
Lots of people like
that.
Yeah.
But the more people we have in our toolbox, I think the better off we're going to be.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for all of your support as well. I served on this side of town and I can remember just the growth of your support. So we just really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Guys.
All right, we're back with our discussion questions. Here are 5 questions for you and your family to talk about this week. Question 1, what did the people next to Jesus do differently? Which response do you think is the bravest? To make fun of or to ask for help? And why? Question 2, how do you think the criminal felt when Jesus promised him paradise? How would that promise make you feel? Question 3, can you remember a time when you needed help? What did you do? How might you ask God for help like the criminal did? Question number 4, what does forgiveness mean to you? Can you think of someone you might forgive this week? That goes back to our forgiveness card, right? Can we try that this week? And question 5, what is one promise from Jesus you want to remember when you feel scared or sad? We thank you so much for joining us and hope you enjoy your week, and we'll see you back here next time. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Turned out they were holding on me, on my skin, digging deeper. All I saw in the mirror, I had to learn. All I wanted was always there, deep inside me. So I leave it at the altar, God. I leave it at the altar, God. I leave it at the altar.